Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. What's up, man?
Yeah, good to meet you over the
For
phone.
sure.
Yeah, this is Maddie. I had mentioned her in my message. She's one of our board members.
Hey, Maddie, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you doing?
Good, good. What's happening? You guys both in? So tell me, they didn't have this kind of stuff when I was there. So there's like cinematography club now.
Yeah, it's been going for a couple of years. I just hopped in as the president this past year.
Awesome. That's
Um,
great.
yeah, there wasn't a whole lot going on with it, but
Yeah.
I until last school year, spring quarter, had never gone to a meeting, and then I showed up.
Okay.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
sounds cool. And it was the president and then Dana, the faculty advisor.
Okay.
Like, do you want to be the president? Yeah, all right.
I
'Cause
remember
you guys are
Dana.
graduating.
Dana was there when I was there.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. I think I was the second class that would have graduated. So it was 2006 would have been my graduating class.
That's cool that Dana was there while you were.
Dana was there. Scott Erlander, who I don't know if is there anymore. Sorry, my
Doesn't sound
so
familiar.
dirty. Scott, I think, might have left more recently. But yeah, Dana was there. It was when DePaul started. I guess they pulled people over from Northwestern, and that's where Dana came from.
Okay. Yeah, she's
Yeah,
the best. Yeah.
I think so. What's her last name?
Cupper?
Copper.
Oh no, different Dana. I'm
Oh,
thinking.
really?
So there was another Dana that was there. Okay.
Okay, interesting.
All right. Cool. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Super excited. Yeah, especially, I mean, having you been a DePaul grad, like, that's awesome. That really.
Yeah. Yeah, no one really. It's funny because like my brother went to DePaul and he's out in LA now, and he was in film school there. And he was telling me when he was there a couple of years ago that like no one knew that I went to DePaul, and um, like I never really reached out, or I'm still in Chicago, so it's like I've always wanted to be involved, but no one really kind of realized some of the people who have finished or who went there, and the ones who are actually doing some work. And so anyways.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't know that you were still out in Chicago. I'd love to, like, once the world's back to normal, if you
Yeah.
want to do some sort of workshop, I'm sure people would want it.
Yeah, that would. It's funny thing is somebody reached out to me like a year or two ago and asked me to do like a CineSpace workshop, like an hour-long thing, whether it was like lighting and camera or both, or like, because my world's natural. I do naturalism cinematography. That's my style, and it's not necessarily taught much in academics. It's academic, at least when I was doing it, and what I'm seeing still, it seems like the kind of process of education, even through like AFI, it's all it's pull every light off the truck, and
Right.
how do you use everything. And I think that there's a lot of um, old school thinking with, just because you have a lot of money or you have a big budget means that you have to use every piece of the tool that you have, where I look at things is that it's funny. There's a let me see, I wrote it down. I was talking to my buddy who's also a director out of LA, and we're working on some stuff, but he was saying, I told him and I said it, and he's like, oh, that's one of the best quotes I've heard. And it's the more money you have, you can just extend your simplicity. So like, to me, everything is about simplicity. It's how to approach things as simple as possible in the most natural and organic way. You go from my first movie I did in Chicago, had a $350,000 budget and 17 days to shoot over 100 pages. You go from that to Eighth Grade, which is 2.5 million, and then I just finished my third film about 4 weeks ago, which was 12 million. And the process doesn't change if you stay true to the work that you believe in. The money you have just allows you to do more. You hire better people, you have more gear, but doesn't change the way you do things. At least that's how I approach it.
Mm-hmm.
So money only extends simplicity. It only gives you more time. It gives you better people. It's a whole nother conversation. Anyways.
No, and I think that'd be an important thing to kind of drill into film students. There's definitely an idea, like, we're really lucky to have access to a lot of awesome, like, industry standard gear. I think there's
Right.
there's an an impulse to go maximalism with it a lot.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, that it's not always the move, right?
No, I mean, and you can go, like I go, I like that word maximalism, but I mean, that's how I approach things from, I've always been the one where I had to do everything on my own. I couldn't afford a lot of lights. I couldn't afford a lot of crew. So I had to get really good with manipulating a camera and lens. And so I look at that as I maximize my camera package. And now that I've done it more and more, I'm maximizing my color pipeline. I'm maximizing what I'm doing on set with not just a LUT, but with full CDLs. So, that's where you start. Like I maximize in the digital space, which doesn't really have correlated, money towards or actual substantial pieces of gear, but like, I'm doing a CDL adjustment or a live grade to both my SDR and HDR pipeline on set for every shot. So then when I go to color, I have all that info. I already know what my look's going to be, and I have a starting point for my colorist, but I'm on set seeing it. So like this last film I was we were one of the first films to run one of the new Aja boxes that allows us to do both SDR and HDR live grading. So we had an HDR monitor on our DIT box and a SDR, both, calibrated. And it was the first time we were able to dial our nits on our HDR monitor while maintaining our SDR grade and doing them simultaneously, and then off-putting it all. And then I have stills of everything, and I have all the files for every shot of the movie. And we did it so that way we could go to color and you save time and money. Producers are happy. But me as a control freak in terms of the look of what I'm doing, I'm learning to light through my grade, build an ambient world, keep it natural. And then I do all my lighting through my CDLs.
So when you're stepping onto set, do you already have like a pretty firm grade that you're going in with, or do you have like a couple different variations? How
Yeah,
do you like to approach that?
Yeah, so the last two shows, so I did a Netflix show called Grand Army at the end of last year. It isn't out yet. I did the final two episodes, 9 and 10, and I used the same LUT through the whole two episodes, but I did CDL adjustments for my scenes. So by maintaining my LUT, I backtrack. I also kept my camera graded at the same white balance the whole show and the same ISO the whole show. So I'm treating my camera like a film stock. I'm using my LUT as my film stock adjustment, and I'm using my CDL as my lighting tool. So there I'm using CDL, and this is the problem with this is that you can't necessarily, like, you do need a little bit of money to do this because you need a DIT cart, you need a live grade system, you need the boxes to be able to ingest everything. It isn't cheap, but it's just the way I've been doing it. And so I did the same thing on the movie I just did. I shot the whole movie at 4400 white balance, the whole thing at area raw at 1600 ISO, and the same LUT. And it was we actually used a final grade LUT from who was it? Let me look. It's an actual a finishing LUT. So most people just use like a Rexona LUT. We actually use a finishing LUT, which is a lot flatter, and then graded it to where we wanted it to, and then use that as my base. And so that base was able to be my starting point for every shot of the movie. And then I would use my CDLs to either bring it cooler or warmer, and adjust my shadows and highlights and the tone and tone mapping, all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
When did you start working with that kind of software? I know you mentioned
eighth grade. So eighth grade I had zero of this. We didn't, you would think, oh, $2 million, you can do this. Like, I was told I didn't have money to have a DIT. So I had to have a loader on that job. And so every single thing I was doing, I was looking through I built a LUT and just trusted that LUT through the process of the show. So where now I'm taking a LUT and I'm actually fine tuning it for every shot. Before, in eighth grade, I had to rely on a little bit more trust in the raw footage on the red and know that I'm not clipping. So as long as I knew I wasn't clipping, then as long as the onset looked, 70 or 80% there through a color grade monitor. So at least I had a color grade monitor. I was fine. I knew that I would get there in color. After that process is when I decided I needed to take more control of that process, and I needed to. I certainly do a lot of trusting in the process and in what the file is and what information I'm going to maintain and what I'll lose. Like that, I'm always almost 100%. I know where I am, but I want to see what is in my head. I want to see on the screen on the day, and that's where I've gotten to now. And you need more money. You need a DIT that is good, who knows that kind of that world. More of a scientific DIT than that's kind of he or she. Sorry, that's the world that a great DIT is that on day 2, I we'll have wheels on the cart. I'll set the CDL LUT to what my base will be, and then a great DIT will then maintain that tonal structure throughout the film, and then I'll just make tweaks. So then I can, days on set where I need to be closer to the director and I can't sit in a DIT tent, I know that he's okay. So there is a lot of where I do think, I'm more in a world now where I'm very heavily involved with the color. I actually so far so that here, I'll show you. I have I own my own panel.
Oh yeah.
So it's the Resolve micro panel. So then, and I have a color grade monitor. So when I'm not working, I get familiar with how to color. That's my main. I really, I know lenses really well. I know cameras really well. A couple of years ago, I'm I need to know how to grade, and so that's where it all kind of started stemming from.
Do you find you mentioned HDR a couple of times? Do you find that that's gonna be the future going forward for a lot of people?
Yeah. So this last show I did is it's a negative pickup, which just means that we're financed by a company, but Amazon will be distributing the movie as an Amazon exclusive or Amazon original movie. Amazon is currently requiring all final grades in HDR. So even though most, 99% of the work on productions currently right now, everyone's looking at SDR monitors. Your focus monitors SDR, clients are SDR, your director's looking at SDR. To get an HDR monitor on set they're very expensive, and 2, the workflow, like I was saying, you need specific boxes that are just finally hitting the market to be able to do it. So we were one of the first. It was a really amazing experience because I didn't like HDR until I did this, and I started realizing that everything that I've been working towards with creating, really smooth, kind of bloomy shadows and, highlights that are really down and compressed. What I've been trying to do is trying to make HDR and SDR. And I didn't realize that until I got this process and, being able to, and when you do HDR, you can control your throttle, you can control, which is your nits. So, HDR is 600 nits, 1000 nits, blah, blah, blah. I can take my HDR grade and take it down to 100 nits, which is what we're looking at SDR, or I can take to 600 and you can see that, background lights really start popping without adjusting skin tone and things like that. So I really started seeing what is possible. And I proved to myself that I could grade a movie in HDR to make it take advantage of HDR, but it doesn't look like what we all think HDR is. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I was proud of. And that's how I grew to love HDR, grading for HDR a lot more. It's I can't even look at what I did at home, except for I have an LG OLED, but I even was talking to my D team, how can I get the stuff from my screen over to there? And he's like, you can't. Like, it's just, the technology isn't, we're not up to speed, we're not ready, but we can stream it through a Apple TV. It's crazy, like, so it's an interesting time when it comes to, what we're expecting, and, what we learn when you're shooting for HDR, and how practicals can look a lot brighter than they are in SDR. And, when you would blow out a window to hide equipment outside, you can't do that anymore because you see into the outside, and, all of that kind of stuff. So you do have to be really careful with how you do things a little differently.
For sure. So I'm guessing you would recommend people, like at our age and our spot and everything, you'd recommend people get into that and learn about that?
I think if you can get into, any color suite that is doing HDR, final HDR color, once things get a little not so weird, but like,
right.
Go over to the mill or somewhere locally that is doing HDR finishing and see how it works. I think it's definitely worth doing. We all have been shooting footage that can be done in HDR. That's the thing, or not. People think that you have to do something different, and you don't. We're all shooting log. We're all in that space that it doesn't change anything. Right. So you have footage to turn to HDR if you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're trying to, again, with the asterisks of once the world is normal again, we're trying to do something through, I think it was Doffenbach. So we had done
that. They're great. Yeah,
you mentioned that. Yeah, so I definitely think that'd be something to explore.
Yeah, no, Lawrence over there is, he's huge with education and that kind of thing, and I think he's really interested in the HDR process as well. I just don't know who has HDR monitors in town, like production wise. Like, we had the Sony, what was it? The Sony 24-inch, which is $18,000. Something ridiculous. 18 or 20 grand for a 24-inch monitor. And then we had obviously a Flanders DM 240 next to it, which is again another $15,000 or $20,000 SDR monitor. So like we were looking exactly at the right stuff. It's just, the rent, for anyone in the, in Chicago's market, most people don't own those,
right? Just
because the rentals won't ever pay them off. Mm-hmm. So you have to like almost, Panavision might have it, or Keslow might have one or two. And, we could always talk to them, either, Stan at Panavision or Jim over at Keslow, and put together, an HDR kind of meeting. I think they would probably be into that, or even Able Cine could do it too. Megan at Able Cine would do it.
For sure.
But yeah, I do think that we need to get people a little prepared for that, because it is, Netflix is requiring it, Amazon's requiring it, Apple Plus is requiring. I mean, any of the major streamers at this point, some of them are doing SDR grades and then doing like a HDR pass, and it never looks that good. And they did that to us on eighth grade, which, it's fine. I didn't even actually watch the HDR pass of it yet, but things are changing quick.
Yeah, so it seems like it.
Sorry that we've totally gone off path, but I'm happy to continue in this direction. But if you want to just throw more stuff at me, I'm game.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely, since it's a like cinematography focused club and we're not just talking to the film school, I mean, like I'm super down to tech and that kind of thing, like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean, I don't want to like bore people either. One of the things that always put me ahead early on, and I mean, I'm young, I guess. I'm 36, right? So one of the things I got ahead was just learning the tech really early.
Right.
Not just the tech of cameras, but the tech of, how log it goes through X09 and the color space, and then learning lenses. Like, man, like you don't need any special camera if you know your lenses.
Yeah. No, that's something that DePaul, I think, has been really, we've been super lucky with, especially this last couple of years, is like, I mean, we were working with Alexas and Reds and the Ultra Primes and things like that.
Good.
Yeah, awesome. And exactly, like if you can start your education with that.
Yeah. when I was in film school my last year, I was assisting a fashion photographer. So I actually did a lot of photography early on. And she only shot with one prime lens the whole time, and she taught me the same thing. So when I started shooting fashion photography when I was like 22 to 25, I shot everything on a 5D and a 50 mil. That was it. And I learned how to teach myself how to move my physical body to frame shots, right? And that has gone really far with where I am today. I could shoot an entire movie with one lens if I had to. That isn't, the choice of a focal length and a lens can change so much with what you're trying to portray, right? And Eighth Grade is a really good example of, we shot that movie on is all lens. It's, the lighting is almost non-existent, and it was purposeful, but it was all about lenses. And the whole thing was wide angles close to her, because all that mattered was Elsie, right? You had to be with her. You wanted to experience everything with her. You never were looking at her from someone else's point of view. And for that reason, you should never leave her sight. So, I mean, everything was shot on I think it was a ultra prime 27 mil, and then we had we had actually the lens package, but
right.
So it's an interesting world. It's an interesting business that we're in, where you only have certain elements, right? You have a camera, you have a lens, and you have lights, but the combination of them and the choices you make can change everything.
Maddie, it looked like you had something.
Oh, so based on the way you're talking, it sounds like you came up more through a camera background. Is that accurate?
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was literally photography after film school, and honestly, the only reason I stopped photography was because I was lonely. It's a one-person job, and it wasn't really, I wasn't fulfilled with what I was doing. And it was right with the boom of like the 5D video boom that started happening. And then so I literally just started shooting specs with my 5D, and from there it just kind of escalated. I was lucky I was the right place in the right time. Chicago was seeing an advertising boom within itself, and I could find myself on by 26 or 27, I was on a job weekly as a DP. So I never actually worked as an assistant or as a PA or produce, any other role. I like to say I faked it till I made it. But I would say I put I put it in during the photography days, and I came out of that. I think in 2.5, 3 years, I shot over almost 3,000 people. And that was from the age of 23 to 25 or 26. So like, I don't know, I got lucky. I landed a couple major contracts with some modeling agencies and just knocked them out for 3 years. It was like 20 people a week. And so when I went and it was all naturalism too. I mean, I had strobes, but it was 75% was natural. So when I went into shooting commercials, I already had a, kind of confidence, and I knew what I wanted, but I just, I had to learn the new lingo. And so within a few years, I joined the union. It's been 10 years. So like 27 or 28, I joined as a DP. And I think one of my first job was like a Lowe's commercial. And, it just kind of went from there. It was, the biggest one I did. It's funny because I did an interview similar to this for ICG, the International Cinematograpers Guild, and they asked the same thing. And I think the big first one I remember was a 6-day U.S. Bank national spot with 2 locations a day, and I had no idea what I was doing, and it was a huge crew. There was a ton of, it was when they used to spend so much money on that kind of stuff. And, it's just, you just don't don't look like you don't know what you're doing, and you look, there's enough people. Once you do union jobs, like everyone there knows what they're doing, so you kind of just let people just get the train going, and when they ask you a question, just answer it. Because in the world of if you want to be a cinematographer, you're literally just answering questions your entire day.
Yeah. Gee, I've heard that story about, there was a DP who had a clicker all day, and he clicked it whenever he got asked a question. He had like 4,000 questions a day. Like,
it is what it is. Like you spend a little bit of time explaining what you want. In the commercial world, you will talk more doing commercials because there's less prep time. So you need to spend more time on the day getting people where you want them and what you need to do. But the reason that we do technical scouts, director scouts, is that those are the times that we figure out 75% of what we need to do. So you have all your keys in place, whether it's your gaffer, your key grip, you have your production designer, everyone that needs to make this happen, who we've all discussed what it needs to do. So on the day when you start working, like on a commercial, I'll show up and the camera's already being built, and the first scene's already being set up by production design and art department. And all I need to do is set, I'm setting the light with the gaffer and key who already know, the rough end of what I want. So at that point, I'm really just answering questions.
Mm-hmm.
You're making sure things are going forward.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to a movie, same thing. We spend 3 or 4 days doing a technical scout of the whole movie, but the difference between a commercial and a movie is in a movie you block your scenes. In a commercial you don't. So in a commercial, because you don't really block, there's nothing to block, right? Because it's slight actions, it's little things, it's more vignette-y. You don't do a multi-person block through action of dialogue because it just doesn't exist in commercials. So when you do a blocking rehearsal in a movie or a TV show, that's where you'll watch your actors with the director, and once they leave and you have the second team, which is your stand-in actors, come in, you as a DP will adjust your block marks, figure out where the camera needs to go from A to B, and you let your camera department do their thing. You discuss with your lighting and grip department what that needs to happen while everyone goes away, and then you come back and it's the same thing. It's just a lot faster. And it's just precision, right? It's all about making sure that you are fully prepared, you are communicating clearly what it is that you like and don't like. Sometimes just saying what you don't like will help people get there quicker than what you do like, because then they know they're in the wrong direction,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how did you make the switch from something like commercials into, it looks like you did a lot of stand-up specials. Like, how did that come about?
I did. So being in Chicago and not in like the LA market, I was heavily focused in advertising just because this is what this town is. It's the ad town. Mm-hmm. So I did ads from when I was 25 to, I still do them, but for 8 years or so, that was all I did. That's all I knew. And really that's all I kind of was focused. I didn't know how to get to that next step. So I never really went towards it. But then you start, meeting people and introducing. You mentioned Chris Storr. Chris Storr introduced me. I got introduced to Chris Storr, which I shot a short film called The Blisters with him. It's on my Vimeo. It's one of the first narrative pieces I've ever done. It's based on Jeff Tweedy and his son, Spencer, and his band, The Blisters. It's pretty funny. It's, Ben McKenzie's guest stars in it. It's whatever it is. It's cool. But from there, me and Chris just kind of hit it off. And he was a young writer director at LA. He didn't have a DP. He's from Chicago, and he started writing like short film specs. He started, pitching documentary specs, and we just started shooting stuff, and it was all free. Everything I did with him for 7 years was free. I would go buy camera shit. I would go buy gear. I'd rent gear. We would just pay out of our pockets, and we would just make, this kind of stuff while I did commercials on the side to make money. And it was all in, the groundwork to get something big. That led us to Bo, and Bo was young. We did his first major comedy special, What, for Netflix. God, 6 years ago or something like that. And we did that kind of special, turned out great. We didn't do another one for 2 years, and then Bo calls and said, "Hey, I have another special I want to do." We're like, "Okay, great." So it was Make Happy. And Make Happy, I still think Make Happy is like maybe the best comedy special out there right now. Like everyone's, yeah, I love it. I mean, me as a fan of it, I think it's great. I think visually nothing's like it. That got us a lot of attention. So from there, we went and did Gerard, we did Hassan Minaj, and then, there's Chris Rock. And Chris Rock's like, whoever did Gerard's comedy special is doing my special. And that was Bo, Chris, and I. And so then we went from doing, Gerard's, and we went and did Chris Rock. And then right when I did Chris Rock, I got the call from Sandler, and Sandler's like, whoever just did Chris Rock's has to do mine. So then I went and did Adam Sandler's tour. And Sandler, most specials are like 2 days. Sandler's I spent 6 weeks on. It was a tour. Like he took an entire crew. We had 40 people in our camera department. We went on tour on charter planes for 3 weeks, 4 weeks around the country shooting his tours. I mean, it was awesome. After Sandler, I've done a couple more, but they're very selective. I'm good at them. I do them differently than most people. I definitely, Netflix has told me that they believe that, I helped set this new cinematic look for comedy specials, and they don't want to do them anymore because it's too expensive. But it's fun. They're hard. Like you're spending a couple weeks concepting and putting together what you need to do, and putting together crew and gear and, floor plans. Like I'm basically taking a floor plan and I'm guessing where these cameras are going to go. And then you go to a tech scout and you see it for the first time and you change everything. And then the show starts and you change everything again because it's the first time you have all the gear there. And you're doing this simultaneously with like 7 or 8 cameras with a lighting designer who is controlling the whole show. And you have to now set the levels for a rock show, or, because basically the way we were doing is we were hiring rock and roll lighting designers to make them look more cinematic, because, the guys who were doing comedy specials were very simple. So now you're controlling, 100 to 200 moving lights with different colors and making them running them at 20% instead of 100, because these guys are used to running them as bright as they could. So now we're convincing people to run them at 20 so they match the camera, so that I can see into the shadows. Because if I run them at 100, then my shadows get super, super crunchy, like super dark. So it's like trying to bring these levels all over the place, and you're doing this all in a day. So, you're working 14-hour day, running around like a madman, losing your mind, and they're crazy. And then the show starts, and you have the headset on, and you have 8 operators on your headset, and you're coaching every single one on your shots. A camera, push in, B camera, pan left. It's just like constantly. And you're, for 2 shows back to back, usually I'm directing 8 people live to shoot a movie. That's the reason why I don't really do them anymore.
How much, so I mean, obviously there's a lot of communication in the moment.
Yeah.
How much is it that versus also just being on the same page with like, is there any planning in regards to like, at this moment in the special, a cam op is going to pan this way because this person do this thing?
Bo's was actually very planned out. That's why Make Happy is what it is. Yeah. But that's because Make Happy is also like very distinct sections.
Yeah.
So we are able to take each story and kind of design a look for each one. So that was a much more micro-managed kind of world. Most of the other comedy specials, like Chris Rock, who doesn't change at all. The lighting only changes when he comes in and comes out, right? But it's like we base it off of Kanye. We design it off of Kanye's shows. So it's like, for that, we're we're live directing these operators in the moment based on how Chris is reacting. And, I have 8 OLEDs in front of me, and I gotta make sure every single one is interesting and different. So it's just constantly like scanning and telling you, like A, B, C, F, whatever. And then I'd always run like 1 or 2 mobile cameras, like handheld guys or, on sticks, and I would have a map for them, and they would have like 8 spots throughout the venue that they can go to. So I'm like, F camera, go to spot 2 on this lens or whatever. And then they would run over there, turn their tear deck on, it would pop in, and be like, okay, great, do a slow zoom in or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So much coordination. That's wild.
It's crazy. It's so much coordination. There's so many people that have to make those things happen. When I did the Hilarity for Charity, which was that Seth Rogen one, it was the first time Counter Special was ever shot anamorphic. It was a fully anamorphic show, and we also did all those sketch comedy things live. So the big thing there was it was more for like the audience show, but we had the stage, and then around each stage was all the different sets. And so the people who were watching in the audience could watch the camera departments running between the sets, setting up and getting things ready while the main show was happening. And then it would flip over, and then I would have a cinema unit shooting handheld in those sets, and it would go back to like my live unit, which had 8 cameras. And that was insane. So that show, I had 13 or 14 cameras going. I had a 4-camera cinema department that was running anamorphic prime. So I had every set of anamorphic primes from Penrod. I had C's, 3 of them. I had C's, G's, and T's, and each set was designed for different sketches, because each sketch had different looks to them. So we're using the different looks to help. I mean, it was like, so not only were these like ACs changing lens styles for you, it was absolutely bonkers. I wish people people just watch us lose our shit doing that stuff. But anyways, doing those kind of things, you get really really, really good at communicating and patience and being calm. So then when you go to a movie set or TV set, it's like, it's a cake.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, how did that prepare you for narrative stuff?
It was the best preparation I could ever have.
Mhm.
I lost my shit 100 million times in every comedy special. I thought that we were never going to make it. Everything could possibly go wrong. And then you do, when I go into a movie, I have 1 camera and I have 1 operator, and it's so much easier, and it flows and it makes sense, and you can control it. I don't know if I would have the same kind of composure I do now on movie sets that I would have. I think my first movie I did before comedy specials, and I think I was a lot more stressed out than I currently am. And this last movie I just did was it was a big movie. Film Nation produced it. One of my producers was, he made a rival, and like, it's a guy who's just, a G. He just knows what he's doing, and he doesn't take any shit, and he knows if someone's doesn't know what they're talking about. And so you have to be on your game. And so it was a really good test, and we did good.
So I'm guessing because you already had that dynamic with Bo and with Christopher, that you got brought on pretty early for 8th grade, or when
I did, yeah.
Went in for that.
It was probably about 9 months before we even started pre-production. So we had a 4-week pre-pro on that movie with a little less budget. Usually it's about 6 to 8 weeks. So Bo contacted me early when Make Happy came out. Just was so happy with it. One of the cool things with Make Happy is we went out to LA and we did that final scene where we kind of transitioned from the stage to his house. We wanted to make it flow as if it felt natural, and it did. It was great. And I think that was just kind of a turning point for him, where he really wanted to get into narrative, and he was telling me about this script that he had, and he wasn't sure what was going on with it. And he's like, do you want to read it? And I was like, yeah. He didn't offer it or anything. He's just like, do you just want to read it? So I read it, and we jumped on the phone. We talked for like hours one night, and we were on the same space, same page. Everything we were saying was in unison. naturalism. She's the focus. It's all about digital life, the phones, the devices. Like, what he was trying to get out to the audience, it was kind of exactly with, the world that I was seeing and how I function. And so we spent a good amount of half a year spending a couple times a week on the phone, sending references. We did tests. He came out to Chicago, and we did a bunch of device tests really early on, probably 4 months before pre-pro. So we did an entire device test with phones and laptops, with inserts of the laptops, with the way you could read the phone off of her eyes, things like that. And so that really helped us navigate the hardest visual part of that movie, which was the devices, because we didn't have time to figure that. Like, you just can't figure that out on the day, and it needed to be completely uniform from start to finish, right? I think a lot of times any project, and I'm sure you guys have run into it, where you have inserts of phones. There's so many phone inserts that's happening these days. Texting this, Instagram that, and a lot of people throw it to the end. They leave it as the last thing you do in the day, and it never becomes a priority. And so Bo wanted this to become the priority. So we did them the right way, and we spent a lot of time on them, and I think it shows. But yeah, I mean, that whole process was an amazing process from start to finish. I don't remember any of it, and I remember all of it. It was a whirlwind, and we all thought we were doing something cool, but we didn't know it was going to be what it was.
Awesome. So I had a question for you. Since eighth grade, had like so many child actors, how do you go about planning your day around like limited hours and just like working with younger actors?
Well, luckily, when you get to movies of that size, you get, not even, even smaller, you have an AD department, right? And I've learned very much that an AD department's absolute job is to coordinate everything. They know every rule, they know how everything works. So that we started realizing early on that film, we were going to be doing 9-hour days. That was the amount of time we had with Elsie. She had to take an hour break, so we had her for 8 hours on set. We started doing a little bit of pre-calls, so we were doing like 10. So we'd show up like an hour and a half before she got there and set up the day. But it was really weird because what we're all used to is we all have shooting calls, right? So 8 a.m. shooting call is when we do our blocking calls. So we get there and we're doing our full blocking rehearsal, or at least director's doing it with them, and then the first team, we get to all come and watch, and that's like our call time, right? So we land and we start working. And this was weird because we would land and we would sit around for an hour or hour and a half. It wasn't like that most ideal way to start each day. And I wish we would have just started with her right away. But what we learned is that we didn't have a lot of time, and she's in every scene of that movie. So it's like, there was never like, oh, well, we can do the adult stuff now. And it's like, no, there wasn't adults. It was just her. So, for some people, I like shorter days. It's fine. It's just, we extended it by doing more shoot days. So I think we did 27 days on that film, which was equal to probably something like 21 or 22 on a normal 12-hour day. So it's really just about time management, making sure you're planned, what you're doing. And we weren't doing a huge page count either. I think we're doing like 4.5 pages a day, which is pretty simple.
Mm-hmm. So this was Bo Burnham's first reach pretty much into the narrative world. With that, like, did you feel like you had like more room to experiment, like a lot more freedom, or was it in some way like slightly restricting at all?
I think it's a hard thing to kind of to address, because I'm finding myself interviewing for a lot of first-time director films, mainly because of how successful we were with Bo's first, and the accolades he had, and I was able to help guide through a lot of that. He gave me a lot of freedom and say over the look of the film. He trusted me, but I also think he was just very focused on Elsie, that he just didn't want to spend the time on anything but her. So a lot of the look of that film is, you know, for good or bad, is due to the choices that I was making. Would I have done things differently today? Well, you know, I think that it maybe just be a little bit more polished now with what I've learned since then, but I don't think that would make the movie better. I think the reason that movie was so good is that, you know, we pushed the digital so hard. And that was, we wanted to look digital. Like that was kind of a talk that we had early on, and we were like, well, do we go Alexa or do we go Red? And the helium was just kind of getting, you know, picking up steam. And so we went 8K helium, but we pushed it. So I think I shot the whole thing at 1600 ISO. So I wanted it to be grainy. I wanted to see the digital noise, especially in the night stuff. We wanted to like see the artifacting. And it kind of came from a conversation in pre-production when Bo was just sitting there and he closed his eyes and he's like, if you close your eyes, you know, you can see like noise, like you can see grain. So like when so that night he went and he's like, I was in my bedroom at night, I turned all the lights off and I would look into the ceiling and I could see noise. It's like, why are we hiding that? And it was a good point. And so I think, you know, what we want to do is we want it to be like a really sharp digital looking film that had noise, that had character, but with like clean lenses. We didn't want to shoot it with like, you know, I always lean towards more vintage lenses because I like all the artifacting, but we shot these on ultra primes and it just gave us the coverage for the 8K because the ultra primes have a much larger center, much larger like exit pupil. So it has more coverage on larger sensors. So the 8K is something like 12% larger than Super 35 or 10%. So it covered that with the wider lenses. It was fast. It was a 2, which is fast enough for what we needed. We shot the whole movie at a 2, and they were small and lightweight. And we wanted to keep, you know, she's little. There's a lot of movement. We just wanted to keep things small package. So it was a good choice. Everything worked out well for it. But you know, the first grade we did was a lot smoother, and we started watching. We were happy with it, but then, you know, some time went by and we both started having conversations with some other people, and we started realizing that it started looking too good, if that's the right, I don't know, not too good, but like not indie, not like flat, but like it just, everything was really smooth. So we ended up upping contrast, pushing our highlights up. We started making it feel a little bit more digital and it ended up more contrasty, and it ended up working just fine. And we were all really happy with how that turned out. In contrast, like the film I just shot, we shot it at 1600 ISO on Alexa, which really no one's doing right now. There's been a couple that have done it, but we're finding that it's really making the camera look like film. And then at night or low light scenes, I bring the camera back down to 800 to help preserve the shadow so it doesn't get too crunchy. But daylight at 600 is beautiful. It looks like film. And but I shot the whole thing on P vintages from Panavision. And so you're talking about 60s and early 70s era lenses compared to, you know, ultras, which are 40 years newer. And I get tons and tons of problems in the lenses, but they look beautiful. And so it's just, you know, each project you do, you know, different looks work great, right? My personal taste is always gonna go towards, you know, really smooth, shallow, and really smooth, you know, shadows, and, you know, old lenses, and it, you know, kind of embracing all of that. But not everything needs that.
Was there ever any initial conflict in your head over, like, because I feel the vintage look and the emulating older styles versus the hyper digital look of like 8th grade? I'm guessing there must have been some level of like, well, I like this, or I don't know. Was there any question in your head, or was it?
No, I mean, no. I think, you know, my tastes have evolved since then as well. And I think it's a good thing. I'm starting to figure out what I'm capable of doing, and the kind of tonalities and lighting and looks that I kind of lean towards. 8th grade, I just wasn't there yet. But I think where I was in that moment was exactly where I needed to be for that film. We never really, there was never any time that we were like, no, this doesn't look right, or this or that. And I think I shot it flatter than how we finished it. And I always do that. It kind of goes back to what I was saying, where I'm trying to push my SDR range into HDR range, right? I'm trying to pull as much information and use as much of it as possible. And so I was doing it at that time. I knew how to do that. And so when we went to color, our colors at Technicolor New York, he's like, you have everything here, every single piece of information. If you want to hold all the highlights, they're all there. If you want to do shadows, it's all there. Like whatever you guys want to do, it's good. So like that was a positive for me. Like you get to color, and the colors is like good exposures the whole time. So that's good. But like back to Maddie, I'm sorry, I kind of got off, but like back to first time directors, one of the things that I've learned over time is that you have to help guide them. You find yourself becoming a little bit of an educator through the process. Even like second and third time directors, like you can't, the thing about cinematographers is that we're always going to have more experience than a director will ever have, right? Like, if a director does 3 or 4 commercials a year, just because how much time they have to spend in preparation with agencies and building it, I'm doing 40 or 50. And now you expand it over years and years and years. Like I could have a lifetime of more work over a director. And it doesn't mean that they're worse or I'm better. It just means that I've done it that more times. So I find myself, one of the things that's really hard is I find myself knowing that what they want isn't going to work. It's just either physically impossible, technically not going to be right, or in edit, you're going to run into problems and it's not going to match. And so it's the communication of how do you communicate that to them? How do you do it in a way that, isn't condescending, that allows you as a artist to help elevate what they're trying to do, and still like you still want to be buddies, you still want to be their friend, you still want to come off this experience, whether it's a day on set for a commercial or a 3-month project on a movie, you want to leave it and hopefully have the opportunity to do another one, right?
So how do you go about doing that? I mean, obviously it's person to person, project to project, but how do you approach
I think I have to just like, one, I have like my camera team who are people I work with a lot. They watch my back. They will tell me if I'm, losing my temper or I'm being condescending or whatever. Like they watch me, which is good. And they'll tell me like, hey, Drew, chill, or whatever. But I think in the day and age of what we're in streaming content, the amount of content that we're creating now versus 5 years ago, 10 years ago, more or less, you're going to be dealing with first, second, and third time directors more than ever before. So I'm learning that producers who have lifetime of work experience are coming to me on set before a director to communicate what's needed, what's your goals, what's your plan before they go to the director, because they know that I'm the one who has to get it done, and they know that I'm going to do it just based off of experience. So then they know they can go to the director, and then let the director, throw out whatever they want to do, and then he'll come back and communicate that, and we'll put together a plan. So it's just it's really selective, being selective of what you want to share, and trying to maintain positivity on set when things might feel like it's going the wrong direction. I think we have to remember that like a cinematographer, direct photography, or whatever, we are the ones that everyone looks at and goes to for answers and guidance and direction most of the time, because one, either directors are just too, a lot of people don't want to talk to a director on set because they're the director, right? They don't communicate with crew or whatever, and then other ones, they just don't communicate well enough. So we end up being the first line, and you have to, I think from there, you need to be able to find a way to communicate to all departments, department heads, or even just a production assistant, and make them feel like they're a part of it, and that that what they're doing means something, and whatever you want to communicate to them or help them get to where they need to be, just be really straight and honest about it, and at the end of the day, I think I don't fluff anything. I don't sugarcoat whatever you want to call it. Like, just, we don't have time to, do that. So it's just same thing with directors. Like, I'll find myself at the end of the day be like, oh man, was I like too hard on him or her? And really, no, it's just like, if that's not going to work and you need to do this and you do this and this, like, just if you explain it, and like, I'll say it in that way. I'm like, so and so, like, if you want that, you need to get this and this, or like, if you want coverage from over there, I need to move the camera around and you need to switch the coverage over here, and then you can start getting stuff over there. Like, understanding all that kind of, understanding an edit, I think is crucial for a DP in our business. Like, the lucky thing I'm really good at is I can sit on set, close my eyes for 5 seconds, and I can see the scene edited out. So I know where the shots are, at least from my point of view, or how he or she's communicated to me. I can see it. And it's just about knowing the shots, communicating that to your operator, because he's the one who's going to be running the on-set kind of stuff, because your operator talks to your assistant, talks to your art departments, all that. But then when you start getting thrown new things from a director that don't match with what we're trying to do, then you need to either let him or her know that that's not going to work, or give them options on how to get there.
Mentioning operators, I was going through your credits and things you'd worked on, and I noticed that a lot of what you'd done outside of shooting had been operating, especially in those like 2012 to 2016 range of years.
Yeah, my early days. Yeah, so like some of the time, because I never was like an assistant, I never got to see other people work, right? So there was a time there where I spent about 2 years kind of jumping around shows locally, just so I could observe. I certainly was doing a lot of commercial work at that point. I was doing a lot of comedy. I just started doing comedy specials. So some people kind of were like, oh, what are you doing here? Like, you have plenty of work. And it was just really I needed to see how other director DPs worked. And I needed to see some like assholes. I needed to see like the bad stuff. And I needed to see if there was good stuff. And it was educational, it was helpful, but it by no means, to this day, I don't think there's much that I learned from them that is shaping what I'm doing today. I think it was more of what I saw that I didn't like has helped shape me, with how you communicate to people who are under you. So that's the thing. It's like, there's a lot of people who are working for a fraction of the cost of that a DP's making, and a lot of them are afraid to ask you questions. And so I try to be approachable, and I try to be educational, and I just try to make sure, especially like PAs, that they feel like they're doing a good job.
In regards to being an operator on set, I feel like that's a really unique position. Just in regards, I feel like you have a better vantage point of everything and how each is running their role than most people.
For sure.
I'm curious to hear you speak on that a little bit, and what the difference is, or the uniqueness of operating.
Yeah, I highly recommend anyone who's interested in being a DP, or even just, there's lifelong operators, like people who just love operating, because there's a lot of responsibility you don't have to be responsible for as an operator, but there's so much responsibility that you still get to be a part of, right? You're essentially framing the movie. You're creating this. You're the photographer almost, right? People are trusting your eye in composing shots in real time. I think it's a really, really difficult job. I think it's a really admirable job. It's pretty amazing. I use one of my best friends is my operator. He did 8th grade. He did my pilot for Amazon last year. He just did my movie I just did now. I fly him wherever I can. And I trust him. I trust him because, one, I know he'll frame it correctly. He's got good taste, but I also trust him because he can run a set, and I can walk away and everything's gonna be fine, and people love him. But being an operator, yes, you are more so in the center of the world than anyone else. The camera's literally, he jokes. It's like the movie's literally on his shoulder. Like everything, they are helming the pacing. They are making decisions. They are the closest line of communication to the actors, as crazy as it is. I think it's so worth being a part of if you can ever go operate on anything. I mean, if I didn't, I operate a really long time, because in the commercial ad world, DPs have to operate. We don't get to hire operators. It's just not in the budgets. Doesn't make sense. So, I mean, I put 10 plus years of operating all my commercials in, and I loved it. I loved every moment of it, but I just got tired. It's beating me up. It's like, it got to the point where like the gimbals just started coming out, and they're like, we want to do gimbals for everything. And like, I'm like, I'm not a gimbal operator, but like I'm running around with gimbals for 2 years. Like, so like I've done it. I know what it takes, and it's not easy.
Mhm.
Wanted to ask, I know you obviously you're really early on in DePaul's whole film school and all that, but are you finding that you have picked up things from that time, or like what that was
Hang
like?
on 1 second. Huh? Okay, give me 10 minutes and I'll do it. No, I'll be right upstairs. Okay. You want to say hi? Come here. I'm doing this interview for work that I do. This is my son, Cole. Here, stand up real quick and say hi. No? Okay, you're just gonna wait. All right, sorry, you can repeat the question.
Yeah, I'm just wanted to ask how you found that DePaul helped you, or if it did, in regards to jumping in or your education going forward in the industry.
I mean, I was here. Say hi.
Oh,
It was early days for me there, right? Like we had a cage. The first graduating class was like 11 people. Mine had like 40 people. So what we had was, we just had access to a cage of lights and stuff. Like, I went out and bought myself a Canon XL2, if you know what that is. You can look it up. It's the best mini DV cinema camera you could get. It was the first digital camera that recorded on mini DV with a native 16:9 sensor. You can believe that. So I owned one, so I could always shoot, and that was the goal. So like a bunch of my buddies, we lived together, and we literally just make short films after short films, and that's all we did. And then, DePaul will hate hearing this, but then we would re-edit them for projects that each class needed, so it's like we're double dutying it. But we would go to DePaul, and my buddy had a pickup truck, and we would fill it up with lights and gear and whatever, and we just did it all ourselves. And we made a couple short films, and I think we made a feature, which like was first going to be like a mini series, and then we turned into a feature. And it was a good experience. I'm sure it's a lot different than if I were to do it now. You guys have a lot more access to things, but maybe even more restrictions than we had. We had no restrictions. Like, there wasn't anyone to compete for gear with. We just took everything. And there was no one that cared. And the thing is, like, they had facilities, but it was early days. Like everyone had Avid, and we just would edit at home. And we didn't even know what coloring was. It's like, you guys are worlds ahead of us.
yeah. So I think we should probably be wrapping it up. I know you are going to do that.
Yeah.
One thing that we've been trying to like wrap up on, because of everything going on, we're at kind of a standstill in the industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have advice for what like young people should be doing right now, or where you think the industry is going to be headed in 6 months, a year, that kind of thing?
I think I'll go kind of backwards, but I think in 2 years' time, 2 years, which is crazy to think, things will be normal. The productions will be the same. Nothing will be a change. The problem is human nature. We tend to go back to what we've done before, and everything kind of goes in a circle. And I think for the next year, year and a half, the sets are going to be really weird. You know, like craft service is going to be all in bags and people are going to have to wear masks. And they're talking about, like, even if it's a local job, all the crew members are going to be in a hotel. So then they can transport everyone from set to a hotel and they buy at the whole hotel. So they know that it's quarantined. Like, there's some weird stuff being talked about right now. The thing that I look at, and my agency, and we're all kind of talking about, my agent talks about, is that we're the most, other than healthcare and things like that, we're the most in demand industry right now. People are literally relying on content every single day to keep themselves occupied. And as you can see, things are getting pushed up and pushed up. So all this content that was designed to come out in 3 months or 6 months or 8 months is getting pushed up to now. So not only are we going to be out of content, we're going to need more of it than we ever knew before. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to see quite a resurgence in a demand for us. And that makes me happy. I'll be working a ton. I probably will have to quarantine for a while for the next year or two from my family when I do work. But I think that's just kind of the world that we're going into. What I personally am doing right now is I'm trying not to worry about it. I'm trying not to think too much into it. I really haven't been doing any work, but I did just come off of a movie. So I did just spend 3 months in Alabama shooting a movie, and I was in it every single day for 3 months. And before that, I was on a TV show for 2.5 months. So like, I've been going hard. So like, this has been a great break for me and a necessary break, but for somebody who wants to continue continue the craft or whatever, I would say this is a great time to download Resolve and learn color, get really good at understanding how to grade, because Resolve's free. That's the best thing about it. You can do all the coloring you want. You actually can edit on Resolve. Like, it's amazing. I would work on that. I would try to, if you have gear, like I used to just like obsess over, I would take a lens and I would obsess over this lens and understand how depth of field fall off works and where things would look differently. And I would try to understand field of view. So then when I would have a conversation with a director, I already know what my field of view of a 50, a 40, a 35, a 29, a 24, a 20, like I know exactly what I'm going to see from where I'm standing. And I've learned that by looking at these lenses over and over. So understanding, what each lens sees. And, the crazy thing is now is all these different formats. So a 24 looks different on a Super 35 than it does on a full frame. It's crazy. So then you start going into the technical stuff. Like, all right, well, a 24 on a Super 35 looks the same as a 35 on a full frame. Okay, so now you start trying to understand your equations, and you start trying to understand what's similar between all these. And then, okay, well, then if a 24 is the same as a 35 on a full frame, and what's the same on an Alexa 65? Okay, well, that's probably like, I think it's a 50. So now a 50 is the same as a 24. And now we're into one-to-ones, right? Or, doubling, right? So 24 to a 50. So now what's the difference between going from a Super 35 to Alexa 65 and doing spherical to anamorphic a 2 times anamorphic? Nothing. Now we're doing the same equations. And so what everyone's trying to achieve in shallow depth of field, they've been trying, with full frame and things like that. If you really think about it, it's exactly the same thing that people have been doing for 50 plus years of anamorphics. It's the same thing. They're just trying to separate people more and more. So, I think it's understanding all that and being able to communicate that really, really precisely and clearly. And I found that a lot of my understanding of lenses and sensor sizes and field of views and all, understanding, vintage Leicas to vintage Zeiss to vintage Panavision to, modern all this, and being able to have a chat like this with a director in response to a script that I read and I'm basically interviewing to shoot his film. I can throw all this out and I can give them ideas, and they love that. They love the fact that they know they're hearing from somebody who can already visualize what it is that they wrote. So that kind of study, I would say study is really, I would obsess over studying things, and it would be to the point where I would just, you know, I have like, you know, pages of notes of like, you know, equations and things being changed to this and that, and just really understanding where we're headed. You know, Super 35, full frame. A Monstro is between full frame and Alexa 65, and then there's 65, and then how does anamorphic fall into all of this? How does, you know, frame lines, you know, 185, 2:1, everyone wants 2:1 now. You know, being able to visualize and you know, talk about how these kind of choices will help somebody's story. It's all about that, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Drew. Super
Yeah, dude.
appreciate it, man. Super happy to talk to you.
For sure.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Thanks so
I'm once things, you know, kind of get better, let me know. I'd love to do like we can do a seminar or something like that.
Yeah,
You know,
too.
I'd
Be
prefer like
amazing.
a naturalism, something that's not in a stage would be ideal.
Yeah, that sounds right. For sure.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated on that. I can keep you updated too on the HDR as well, if you'd like.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, we can do that too. I think, you know, there's tons of sources in town that I'm sure people would be happy to be a part of, and I'd be happy to be a part of it too. And so is this just, are you guys just going to share this with students who can log in and watch it, or?
Yeah, we've been posting, this is the second one we've done, and we posted the last one on YouTube on our
Cool.
club YouTube channel, and then we'll just post
Right
it
on.
on like Facebook groups and that kind of thing.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Happy to be involved.
Thank you very much, dude.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, dude. Bye, guys.
Soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.